begins with NBA Countdown at 7 on ESPN and the ESPN app.
Countdown crew!
All right, revisiting our top story, Cleveland defensive lineman Myles Garrett and Larry Ogunjobi and Pittsburgh center Marquise Pouncey were ejected after a melee in the closing seconds of Thursday night's game. Garrett tore off Rudolph's helmet and proceeded to hit him in the head with the helmet. All right, we welcome back in Damien Woody. We had a conversation with you earlier. We're continuing it right now. Damien, my question to you is, so far in the show, one kind of conversation we haven't heard, or one take we haven't heard a lot from, is the idea of Garrett possibly using the helmet as a weapon. Perhaps the word assault coming up. You mentioned in our last segment, hey, let's be very real about this. Perhaps, worst case scenario, he could have killed that man if things went differently. Do you think that there is any warrant to the idea that perhaps this is bigger than just suspension of a couple games, like this was assault?
I absolutely believe it was assault. You know, watching it in real time, again, as a player that's played in the National Football League for 12 years, I've seen a lot of things. I've seen a lot of fights. But, again, we're talking about a guy taking off a helmet. And usually in that particular situation, things quell down, things die down once a helmet comes off. But he used the helmet to strike another player in the head. Okay? Now, thank God nothing serious came of it. But if that crown of the helmet, if he had hit Mason Rudolph with the crown of that helmet with the force that he was coming at him with, who knows what could have transpired at that moment in time. That was absolutely used. I looked at the whole thing. It definitely was assault. I said it last night. I'll say it right here. What transpires from this, I don't know. I think things will probably die down and go away, but I viewed it as an assault.
In baseball, a pitcher might throw behind. It's not when he throws at the hitter's head. It's when he throws behind his head, because the natural instinct is to dive away. And pitchers sometimes do that. They throw behind the head, not as much anymore, but they used to do it more often. And that's all. Like, you're trying to hit the dude in the head with a hardball going 100 miles an hour. It's the same thing, because the culture of baseball is different. People aren't reacting the same way. I understand. I see a lot of former players and executive types talking about this, completely outraged because they don't remember seeing it. And it's such a dangerous sport already. There's a certain brotherhood that at a certain level we're going to take care of each other. So I appreciate your point of view, Damien. When I look at what happened, however, I don't see some premeditated action on the part of Myles Garrett. I see one player with a motive. He was terrible. He threw 4 interceptions. His team was about to lose. The game was almost over. He was getting sacked a lot. The defensive end was on top of him. He started a fight. I saw that same player escalate a fight, tried to twist the helmet off. I saw that same player lose that escalation, have his helmet taken off. And I saw that same player when the other guy who he had antagonized, done all those things and escalated against, he pursued him. I saw the other player like, oh, he's coming for me now. Just swing at it. Whatever was in his right hand. He was like, if it was his fist, he would have done it. And it was bad judgment and impulse control on Myles Garrett's part. And for that, he should be punished. But this idea that it should somehow be career-threatening, or I'm like, as I said, I won't fight too hard against a 6-game suspension. I think that's on the outside. Or that it's actually assault, to me, is ridiculous. That's not what I saw happen.
Here's where I'm at with this. I'm sort of in the middle because, again, Max Kellerman, I haven't agreed with your position all morning long. With the exception of assault, I think we're going a little bit too far. Boogie McFarland, I believe, was quoted as saying that if he were the Pittsburgh Steelers organization, they wouldn't leave Cleveland until charges were filed against Myles Garrett. I think that's excessive. That's my personal opinion. I also think that the agent for Mason Rudolph, Tim Younger, I believe his name, he's quoted as saying all options are on the table. That's why, just to let our viewers know, that's why this subject is being broached, because the agent for Mason Rudolph said all options are on the table in regards to potential legal action. And we have a guy like our very own Booger McFarland, does a great job for us on Monday Night Football, saying that if he were a member of the Steelers, they wouldn't leave Cleveland until charges were filed against Myles Garrett. I think that on the football field, in the heat of the moment, what transpired, as egregious as it was, it should be specifically handled by the National Football League. I don't believe that law enforcement should get involved. Law enforcement should get involved if something happened in the tunnel, when you were dressed and you walk into the team bus and stuff like that. Law enforcement should get involved if it's something that happens off the field, even though you're NFL players and you get into something in a hotel room or something like that. But on the football field with blows being thrown, bodies banging against one another, et cetera, I think in an incident like this, again, as egregious as it is, as much as it warrants, as far as I'm concerned, a season-ending suspension for Myles Garrett, I do believe bringing law enforcement into the equation is opening a Pandora's box, because then the public out there is going to clamor for everything to involve law enforcement officials. The NFL has the power to exact a level of punishment palpable in some people's eyes to what law enforcement might entertain you, fine you, you know what I'm saying, put you behind bars for 2 weeks, or they might do something like that. The NFL can sit up there and confiscate your pay and have you out of the league for the next year. There are circumstances in which the NFL can exact a level of punishment that would justify law enforcement staying out of this.
Stephen A., let me ask you a question, okay?
Yes, sir.
Do you consider that action part of the football play? Yes or no?
I'm sorry. Somebody was in my ear. I couldn't hear your question.
Do you consider what Myles Garrett did as far as swinging that helmet part of an actual football play? Yes or no?
Good question.
No, I don't. But it did. But
that,
I do.
Go ahead. Okay, let me finish.
Sure.
That's the central issue that's my central problem in this particular situation. It had nothing to do with any play.
But let me come back to you.
Hold on, let me finish.
Sure.
Go ahead. I'm gonna let you go ahead.
Here's what I want to say to you. If that's the case, Damien, then why are we sitting here waiting for actions to be handed down from the National Football League? See, what I'm saying to you is this. As a football player, and hear me out here, and I'm not saying that you're trying to have it both ways or anybody's trying to have it both ways, because, again, when it comes to the issue of legal, of the authorities getting involved, I'm right in the middle. You see where I'm going with it. I don't agree with Max, but I'm stopping short of going that far. Here's why. If that's the case, the police should have been waiting for Myles Garrett the second he walked off the field. But that wasn't the case. You know why? Because it's an NFL football field. What? And you know that the NFL is the authority in that matter when it comes to a player and an on-field transgression.
Let me ask you this.
Sure.
Would you agree that something like this is rare? We have never really seen anything like this.
Very rare.
So in this particular situation, this is all new territory.
Well, not
this is
totally.
all new territory.
Not totally.
As it relates to what you just said.
Well, remember when Incognito got into it with somebody? I forgot who it was, and they ripped off his helmet? Now, it was Incognito, who's a 320-pound man who, by the way, is an offensive lineman, and some of the stuff that he was doing warranted that guy's reactions in some people's eyes. Whereas in this particular case, the helmet was still off, but we're talking about a quarterback that just got slammed to the ground by Myles Garrett and then tried to rip off his helmet. I'm just saying, it's a different area.
Now, let me ask you this one last question.
Sure.
If the outcome had been different, if the crown of the helmet had been used and Mason Rudolph had sustained a serious injury on the field, would that have changed your perspective on this?
Probably so.
Right.
Probably so.
And Damien, me as well, but I'd like to say something about that.
Hold on, before you say that, last thing, and then I'll give it to you, Max. If somebody, for example, I hate to go to this extreme because it has nothing to do with this, but it's almost like there's a difference between attempted murder and murder. Murder is when somebody actually dies
or
because
first
you
degree
killed them.
and second
you see
degree,
but if a person lives, then guess what? It's attempted murder.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? In other words, what actually occurred does matter.
And let me just say, okay, even if you say attempted murder, and like I don't even like to use this kind of language. However, manslaughter is different. In other words, that's a crime of passion, they call it, and it's not premeditated. Now, I want to look at that for a second.
Right.
I want to look at Mason Rudolph's behavior, because what has happened is Myles Garrett's really what we're arguing here is no one's disputing who started it, who escalated it, who pursued it, who continued it. The facts are it's on video. That's all Mason Rudolph. Myles Garrett's reaction was disproportional, and that's what we're focusing on. But now let's just look at Mason Rudolph for a second. Here's what it is. One of two things happened in his pursuit of Myles Garrett. Either he was seeing red and lost impulse control, right? So without his helmet, foolishly pursued a guy with his helmet. By the way, he had the upper hand because he had two linemen, his team, restraining Myles Garrett. Either Mason Rudolph had an impulse control issue right there, seeing red, or he realized, I don't have my helmet on. I have two guys restraining the other guy. He can't do anything to me, and he tried to exploit the situation by manipulating those circumstances. Either way, that's culpability on Mason Rudolph's part, and no one wants to talk about what he did.
All right, guys, we got to go. Damien Woody, thank you for joining us. You brought a take we hadn't heard so far on the show, that you take this very seriously, even beyond the suspensions that will probably come from the NFL as assault. All right, still to